An Iranian plot to try to kill the president-elect. What we're learning tonight. Plus, Footloose, a major American company now backtracking from China. Why they're citing Trump. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight. All right, so it's 2 down, and tonight 2 to go. Republicans will control the White House and will control the United States Senate 73 days from now, and tonight they are just 2 seats away from holding on to the House of Representatives. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. A live look from across the Intercoastal in Palm Beach, Florida this evening, where Donald Trump begins to shape his second administration. And today, a legal formality. The special counsel, Jack Smith, filing a motion to essentially end, at least for the upcoming 4 years, the federal election interference case against the next president of the United States. But first tonight, here from the Hill. Remember when Trump said this in late September about Iran?
We've been threatened very directly by Iran. And I think you have to let them know, because the best way to do it is through the office of the president, that you do any attacks on former presidents or candidates for president, your country gets blown to smithereens.
Well, tonight, the Department of Justice with a big warning of just how dangerous that nation remains. The DOJ unveiling in a filing that an Iranian man told federal investigators in September the Iranian Revolutionary Guard tasked him with trying to kill Trump. In the murder-for-hire plot, federal officials say the Iranians claimed money was not an issue. Justice Department officials also say this was part of a broader scheme, which involved trying to kill a U.S. citizen who is a critic of the Iranian government. NewsNation legal contributor Jesse Weber analyzed the U.S. government's complaint, leads us off here on the Hill this evening. Jesse, hello, good evening. Thank you for being with us. You say you've been through this, you've read through this. Hats off to the Department of Justice. Tell me.
So I can't tell you, uncovering a murder-for-hire plot is one thing, but uncovering a murder-for-hire plot where you're dealing with the IRGC and you're dealing with an Iranian asset who was essentially recruiting members that he met in prison to carry out targeted attacks against U.S. nationals, including former President Donald Trump and soon-to-be elected Donald Trump, is just remarkable. And the way that they've gathered up this evidence from finding a digital footprint, communications, phone records, iCloud accounts, payment history, hats off to the DOJ and the FBI. And I just have to say this real quick. Donald Trump has indicated that he might clean house when it comes to his administration. Yeah. Just do caution. Do caution when you think about the great work that the men and the women of the FBI just did to uncover what is a really, really scary plot and could have had disastrous consequences. Just think about that before we decide to clean house.
He's never had issue really with the rank and file. He's had issue with the top, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And as he come in, he'll certainly put his team in place. What comes next here, Jesse?
Yeah.
As it relates to this investigation and what the government's going to try to do?
So 3 people have been indicted. The main IRGC asset, Fareed Shakari, he is in Iran right now. There is no way he is coming back here unless the Iranians decide to give him up, because he seems to have been speaking with federal investigators. We're still not entirely sure how those communications started, although it seems that he would.
To me too.
Yeah, it seems like he was trying to use it as a bargaining chip to get a lenient sentence for a friend or a family member of his. But what it does is clear the 2 Americans who were arrested, their trials will go forward. This case will move forward, and the evidence against them is quite significant. So unless they have some more information to give up about connections they have to Iran or another player, I don't think that they're going to have anything as a bargaining chip. This case is going to move forward against them.
All right. Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it as always. Talk to you soon, Jesse. Thanks. All right. Well, if past is anything like present, this could potentially be a notable weekend for Donald Trump. I'll take you back to 2016 during his transition then. Trump announced his chief of staff and a senior advisor during his first weekend as president-elect. Now, Trump, as you know, has already announced the chief of staff role, meaning on this second transition, he's a step ahead of where he was compared to the first. Still, crucial cabinet posts need to be identified in the upcoming days and weeks, and lots of decisions to be made there. Our Robert Sherman is live outside the heart of the transition. He's in West Palm Beach, Florida, for us once again this evening. Robert?
Hey there, Blake. And with that White House chief of staff position now being filled, the big question is exactly how is this administration going to be built out from there? I can tell you this, sources telling us that you can anticipate it's going to be competitive. Here's the deal, Blake. There's a lot of people who want jobs in this administration and a finite number of spots to go. So will you see people from the 2016 administration jockeying for a position, new faces potentially as well? Sources also confirming us that one of those names being tossed around, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, for some kind of role relating to energy. But of course, nothing has been formally announced yet from the transition team. Something else that's been ongoing this week is that the president-elect has been having conversations with world leaders, one of them the head of the Palestinian Authority, in which they've had conversations about the conflicts around the Middle East and the hope for peace. And that is something that the president-elect has said that he wants to be a top priority when assuming office, is trying to find a way to bring down the tension around the globe. Blake?
Our Robert Sherman, live for us once again tonight in Florida. Robert, thank you. All right, so the GOP trifecta in Washington hinges on uncalled House races. Now, there are still 15 races to call in the United States House of Representatives. Right now, Republicans are 2 wins away from keeping their majority. Our Chris Steyerwalt is here to break it all down. The election almost done. You still get the animation, though. That's a good deal.
Obviously. Give the people what they want, Blake.
Give the people what they want. That's why you're here, my man, the best in the business. All right, so let's go interactive here, Chris, to a couple races that our buddies over at DDHQ are still watching.
Right.
And this is, so first off, this is the lay of the land in the House. 216, you need 218, 93% chance that Republicans get there. But I'm going to take you into California, and I'm going to take you to the 41st Congressional District there. The race there that they're watching, Ken Calvert versus Will Rollins.
So this is Palm Springs for older Americans. This was Sonny Bono's old district.
Okay.
This was a traditionally very Republican district that, as California has continued to migrate more and more Democratic, has become more and more competitive. This is Ken Calvert's been there for some time. And Democrats thought they had a decent shot. They brought Will Rollins, I think, back. I think this is a rerun.
Right.
And it was very close last time, and it's very close again.
All right. 45th District will stay in California. This is in the San Francisco area. The incumbent is Michelle Steele.
Michelle Steele is a star for Republicans, Asian woman, California. They House Republicans have really put her forward to say this is reflective of the new coalition, and Democrats would love to flip this seat. Now, you wonder why? Why, Chris? Is it so hard to call these races in California? And my plea to you, California, is fix your voting. This is too long. It's too much.
Look at the number there.
Right.
75% in. They still have a quarter of just this race, and I could tick through all of them. It's basically that.
California's law is that if you're postmarked by Election Day, you get 10 days to get all the ballots in, and the counting goes very slowly. California, you can do better. I'm going to
take you up now to the state of Washington and the 3rd Congressional District there. This is a fascinating one. This is Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. We've talked about leading into this, sort of Tom Suozzi in New York and how he was able to win that district there. She's kind of like the Tom Suozzi of the West Coast for Democrats.
Okay, so what's missing from that graphic? What's right below that district? It's Portland, Oregon, right? So there's rural parts of it, and there's suburbs of the capital at Olympia, but the heart and soul of the district are the suburbs of Portland. How has it been in Portland for the past few years? Right? Bananas, right? COVID crazy, and Portland became sort of the epicenter of the problems that people on the West Coast were having with the pandemic, with Black Lives Matter, with lots and lots of stuff.
Right.
These voters kind of want to be Republicans. She got this seat because she went up against Joe Kent, who is a lot. Joe Kent is a lot. And if you like his brand of a lot, you think he's great, but he was not a good fit for the district. She gets it. Now it's a comeback. How come he's not beating her? And the reason he's not beating her, other than being a lot, is she tracks with the district. We call it the House of Representatives. When you look at Perez, when you see how she does this, she is pragmatic. She is compromise-oriented. She and her husband run a auto shop. They do auto repair. She leans into being connected to her district, and that has helped her.
She says Democratic candidates going forward need to be normal. All right, let me take you nationwide here, and I want to show the presidential map, Chris, because this is a question that I have, and I'm sure a lot of folks have. I'm looking at Donald Trump, 312 electoral college votes. All right, I'm going to go to the United States Senate now. I'm looking at, and a popular vote too, by the way, I'm looking at GOP 52 could get to 53. And I'm looking at a House of Representatives, Chris, that Republicans will have a good shot of winning, but they might not pick up any seats, actually. Square that for me.
They might even lose a seat or two.
Huh. Okay.
Okay, so this is an election that is the mirror image, the inverse of what happened in 2020.
Right.
It's the same kind of election. It's just a red one instead of a blue one.
Okay.
And the message that Democrats failed to heed in 2020 was that they had a mandate to, as Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez said, be normal. That was the mandate. But they overinterpreted what happened. They went overboard. They did too much. Voters are saying the same thing to Republicans right now. They're out there. In all of those House districts that should be tipping the other way, where the Republicans should be expanding their majority, not seeing it maybe contract, voters are saying, take it easy. Take it easy. Be cool, guys. Can you be cool? And we'll see.
All right. We will see. Steyerwalt breaks it down. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Still to come here on the Hill on NewsNation. He's one of the most popular radio hosts. Millions listen to him. Why Charlemagne the God is now saying, wait a minute, about the Heart of the Harris campaign. Plus, the famous American shoe company Steve Madden announces they will cut down production in China. How Donald Trump is already playing a role in that decision. One of Trump's top China trade negotiators from his first administration joins us live here on the Hill. And did you see what Mayor Eric Adams says? No more debit cards for migrants in New York City. All of this right after Trump wins. I'm Blake Berman. Welcome to Washington. This is the heart of politics. We're back and forth. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. 3 days after President-elect Donald Trump's victory, the shoe mogul, Steve Madden, the company says it's pulling some of its production out of China. The company announcing plans to slash as much as 45% of its China-made products amid concerns of potentially higher tariffs under the Trump administration that will be incoming. Now, during his campaign, the president-elect pledged to impose up to 60% tariffs on Chinese-made products and tariffs of 10 to 20% on all imported goods. Steve Madden's CEO commented on the move during the company's earnings call earlier this week.
We are putting that plan into motion, and you should expect to see the percentage of goods that we source from China to begin to come down more rapidly going forward.
China, by the way, is bracing for potential trade tensions under the incoming administration and just unveiled more than $1 trillion package to shore up its economy at home. Joining me now is Cleet Willems. He was the deputy director of the National Economic Council in the Trump administration. Cleet was one of the key negotiators for the United States with China for the Trump administration. Great to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. How many more Steve Maddens are coming down the line? Because the election happened Tuesday night. They jump on the earnings call on Wednesday and they say, you know what? We're starting to get out of here.
Right. Well, I think a lot of companies realize that with President Trump back in the White House, you are going to get a very proactive, robust policy on China. Let's not forget, a couple years ago when President Trump was first elected, being this tough on China wasn't the only game in town. And there was a lot of dissension about how the United States was going to deal with that relationship. There were a lot of people who still thought maybe through the normal way of doing business, we would change China and we would have peace and harmony on the trade front. President Trump changed that conversation. He's back now. I think he looks at what's happened the last couple of years. The Biden administration hasn't necessarily held the line in every respect. And so he's going to come back and he's going to be tough.
So they haven't, you say haven't held the line, but they did keep every single tariff in place.
Right.
And then they added some on top of that, or at least have wanted to add on top of that. So where does Trump go from here? Because you know how this goes. It's all a negotiation at the start with Trump.
Right.
And then you end up who knows where you end up? So where do you think this goes, and where do you think this ends?
We don't know for sure what the policy is going to be in terms of tariffs on China,
okay.
Right? I mean, this is something President Trump is going to pursue in a very robust way. I think that all the details need to be worked out. But to your point on the Biden administration versus Trump, right? Look, here's the difference. You're right. The Biden administration did maintain the tariffs, but they had a very lethargic policy with respect to China. When President Trump was in office, he was proactively engaging with China, raising the tariffs as appropriate, taking other measures to try to get them to stop their unfair practices. And you haven't seen that kind of proactive engagement out of the Biden administration, and I expect that to change. I expect there to be a broad use of tariffs to try to get China to change some of that behavior, because left unchecked, what are they doing? They're not only hurting U.S. companies in China, they're actually distorting global markets in a more pervasive way than they were a couple years ago.
So just like anything, Cleet, with time comes experience.
Yeah.
Right? You sat at the table across from the Chinese team negotiating during the quote-unquote trade war. The United States learned a lot about China. China learned a lot about Donald Trump. From your vantage point, from having been there at the table, let's take both of these. What did we learn about China?
I think one thing we learned about China was when we amped up the pressure, they were forced into a position where they had to deal with us. And let's go back in time, right? When the U.S. first took the $50 billion action against China, the first set of tariffs, China basically told us to take a hike.
Okay.
They didn't engage. They didn't take it seriously.
It was nothing to them.
Correct.
Okay.
But as he continued to ramp it up, all of a sudden they came to the table and they wanted to deal. And so I do think that China, especially with the vulnerable economy that they have today, right? I mean, China is not in a great position domestically. And so I do think that, we might be in a position where we have even more leverage over them than we did back then. And I think the playbook last time is something that President Trump may want to pursue.
Okay. So that's what we learned about them. The $50 billion, doesn't move the needle. You ramp it up, it moves the needle. What do you think they learned about Trump?
Well, I think
I see a deep sigh there.
Well, they learned that he's serious.
Okay.
Right? They learned that when he makes these kinds of threats about broad-scale tariff action, he may just well pull that trigger. And so I think China has to take him seriously again, and is going to have to engage. Now, again, I don't know how this is going to play out. That is up to the president. Right? But I do think one of the things he will want to do early to test China is to get a sense of, what are you actually going to do about this phase one deal? We worked hard.
The one that was implemented that you and your team negotiated.
We worked incredibly hard on this deal. We inked it, and then the ink wasn't even dry. COVID hit us. There wasn't really a chance to try to implement that. Then the Biden administration came in, and they threw the deal to the side. And so I think the first question that Trump may want to see is, okay, China, are you actually going to follow through? Okay. And then that may dictate where we go from there.
Is that resumption of trade war, quote unquote? It was called a trade war back then.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know that I would put it as we're resuming a trade war. In many respects, the trade war has never been over.
Right.
As I mentioned,
they kept the tariffs.
Well, they kept the tariffs, but also China is continuing to ramp up excess capacity. Right? I mean, if you talk to most economic analysts, they say that China is coming for the world, not just on steel and aluminum, but EVs and a whole range of other products. Right. And so we have no choice but to try to protect ourselves against those kind of unfair practices. And so what I hope this time around that President Trump can do is, number one, meet them on the tariff issue, but also think about structurally, how do we change the situation within China? And I know this is hard, but if they don't change their low level of consumption among their middle class, they don't change their savings rate, they're going to continue to pile money into unproductive uses and flood the world with excess capacity. And that is something that we need to address.
Cleet Willems had a front row seat first go around. We'll see what happens next time.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, still to come here from the Hill. From New York City to San Francisco, how big city crime is causing a rightward shift in urban areas. Did you see what happened in an election in San Francisco? What they decided there? Plus, Israeli soccer fans face vicious anti-Semitic attacks in Amsterdam, facing the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, to step in. The very latest here on the Hill. Thanks for being with us on this Friday night. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation on this Friday evening. Thank you for being with us. I'm Blake Berman. The 2024 election results show, among many things, that Republicans are gaining ground across the country in all levels of government. California and New York, for example, are among a few historically deep blue states that have seen shifts to the right. Still blue, still very much Democratic, but also still very much shifts to the right. And big news overnight in the state of California. Daniel Lurie was elected to be San Francisco's next mayor. The city's current mayor, London Breed, conceded to Lurie, a relative political outsider. Now, Lurie's campaign argued San Francisco crumbled under Breed's leadership, the city experiencing rampant crime, drug problems, and a homeless crisis. Now moved 3,000 miles away across the other coast in the Big Apple, another shift there. The New York City mayor, Eric Adams, putting an end to its controversial debit card program for migrant families. The migrant crisis became a major campaign issue, really no matter where you were in this country, and ultimately helped, among other things, New York and New York City. Again, deep blue areas shift a little bit to the right from what we're seeing according to the election numbers. Joining me now is the Democratic congressman from California, Raul Ruiz. He was reelected to the 25th District in Southern California along the U.S.-Mexico border. Congressman, congratulations on your win. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill this evening.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Why are we seeing this shift?
I think we're seeing this shift across the country. And one of the things that we're identifying is that the Trump campaign strategy really targeted low information, low propensity voters through non-traditional ways of communication. And their message was very impactful because it utilized a lot of the strong emotions of hate and fear and anxiety, a lot of disinformation regarding that we have the all-time high.
You think they won because of hate and fear?
Yeah, in terms of the fear of immigrants, the disinformation about that immigrants are have more propensity for crime, when in fact statistics show that not only crime rate has been coming down in our country, but also immigrants are less likely to be to commit a crime. Simply because of their fear of being identified.
So look, there is going to be an autopsy after this race of the Democratic Party, and you're hearing it right now within your party, what your party needs to do going forward. And what I hear from you is a lot of Trump and Trump's rhetoric and not a lot of introspection with the Democratic side. And I wonder what the introspection on the Democratic side is.
Okay. First is looking at what worked for Trump. Then we need to look at what we need to do. And what we need to do is we have to, first of all, listen more closely to the needs, aspirations, and hopes of the American people, primarily working families. We also need to address the Latino community as a persuasion community and not just a target community, so that we can invest in making sure that we're addressing the economic household needs of all communities in our country, and not just come around every 2 years and expect that they're going to vote with the party. And I can tell you this, as the immediate past chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, it's something that we've been advocating for the Democratic establishment. But most importantly is to really promote the policies that were going to result in bringing down inflation, increasing wage, protecting a worker's right to organize, bringing down the cost of child care, giving tax credits for parents with children, and making sure that Medicare would help cover the cost of taking care of grandma and grandpa in our homes.
So in your state right now, Gavin Newsom, the current governor, Democrat, is essentially trying to Trump-proof California. And we saw what happened in San Francisco with London Breed. And Congressman, in the center part of your state there, in San Francisco, and the scene there, and the microscope that's put on San Francisco, what's been happening to that area, especially what's been happening to the downtown part of that area. Is London Breed a cautionary tale, and should Gavin Newsom and Democrats in your state be paying more attention to what happened in that race?
Absolutely, without a doubt. We have to pay attention to what happened in that race. We have to pay attention to what happened in different counties where Trump got a lot more votes than he did in 2020. And we have to start paying attention to pay more attention to working families who are struggling right now. Look, I think that there was a referendum across the world after the pandemic. And we know that the pandemic was a significant factor in inflation because we know other countries also are struggling with inflation. And the party at power had a very difficult time defending their positions anywhere, including here in the United States, because of that.
It was the question I was asking. How does the incumbent win when 78% of the country says that prices are higher than their wages and 79% says you're on the wrong track? And there's a lot of questions about what Kamala Harris did and didn't do to address that. Congressman, I got to leave it there. Raul Ruiz in California. Thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. Meantime, a scary situation for the congressman's colleague in Florida as a man has been arrested following threats to the Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz. Among his belongings, a manifesto with anti-Semitic rhetoric. The news comes just hours after Israeli soccer fans attending a game in Amsterdam were assaulted in the streets in what the Dutch Prime Minister is calling anti-Semitic attacks. Our NewsNation Joe Khalil joining us now. Joe, hello, good evening. Congressman Moskowitz, he's one of those visible members of Congress, right? On TV a lot. He's out there. He's Jewish, he represents South Florida, and he just came out with this post about what happened to him. It is really scary.
It's alarming. And he broke the news himself, and he basically said police came to him the day before Election Day. They arrested a man close to his home. He was in the vicinity with a rifle, with body armor, with a manifesto that had one name on it, and it was Moskowitz's name, and anti-Semitic rhetoric. It's disgusting. It's disturbing. And I'll just add this. In 2016, Secret Service was worried about how many threats lawmakers were getting. Yeah. They had 1,000 that year. Last year, 8,000. And that number keeps going up every year.
What was the response? Yeah, it's horrifying. It's beyond disturbing. What was the response out of Washington and out of Israel today as it relates to that scene in Amsterdam?
Yeah, it's sad that we have two big anti-Semitic stories, right? So in Amsterdam, the response that we got from President Biden and from Netanyahu mirrored each other, both saying that, look, what we saw has echoes of the darkest periods in our history in the last 200 years when it comes to anti-Jewish hatred and anti-Semitism. You had people who were attacking Israelis who were just there to watch a soccer game after the game, riding up on them, seeing if they had any sort of, Israeli shirt flag for the team, and just at random attacking. 5 people were hospitalized, serious injuries there. So again, really ugly. Biden, Netanyahu, not always on the same page, but today their rhetoric almost mirroring each other.
Almost identical. Joe Khalil, thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, this, by the way, is just a taste of, or a little part of the global unrest that awaits President Trump's incoming presidency. One of the many promises the president-elect made during his campaign was to be, quote, the best friend to Jewish Americans that have ever had. But what could that actually look like? Joining us now is the former Israeli special envoy for combating anti-Semitism, New York Times best-selling author twice over. She is the author of Israel, A Simple Guide to the Misunderstood Country on Earth. She is Noah Tishby. She's back once again here on the Hill. Noah, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. Obviously, the circumstances here are not what we want to be the reason for this, but here we are. How do you think, Noah, the election here in the United States changes the many, many, many disturbing scenes that we've seen when it comes to anti-Semitism, both here and abroad?
Well, this is going to be a long game that we're going to have to be playing because we've seen anti-Semitism on the rise in the last 30 years, and its new form, anti-Zionism, which is what we've seen in Amsterdam last night. Obviously, everybody is watching America very carefully, and what has happened today, there's something interesting that occurred today that I've seen some reports that are unconfirmed, although I'm talking to my friends in the region about Qatar actually trying to push out Hamas leaders from its country, which would be a really interesting development considering how quickly it happened after the elections. Time will tell how this is going to affect the region. The region obviously prefers what they refer to as a strong man, or what they perceive as a strong man. They are, it's not a very polite region. They understand when they see aircraft carriers coming into the region. That's what Iran understands. Iran, as the head of the octopus of everything and anything that's bad about the Middle East, including all its proxies, parties, Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and so on and so forth, needs to hear America loud and clear, needs to believe that America is actually carrying that big stick. And I hope they're listening this time around.
Noah, I was traveling alongside the former president back in May of 2017 when he made that first visit. It was to the Middle East. And I remember being a part of the press corps, and we were like, wait a minute, the Middle East? But that's where Donald Trump decided to go. And in Israel, the reception there for him, whether you love Trump or hate him, you cannot deny the reception that he got in Israel at the time. You know what I'm talking about. If you were there, you saw it. How are the Israelis going to perceive? How are the Israelis going to perceive a second Trump term?
Well, you're not going to find a lot of people that don't like Donald Trump in Israel. Most people in Israel absolutely love Donald Trump. They also appreciate President Biden, but they love President Trump. And they want somebody to get this over with. This is something that cannot be dealt with softly. This is something that needs to be dealt with force. Iran should not be allowed to have nuclear power at all whatsoever. This is not just the interest of Israel. It's not just the interest of Saudi Arabia. This is entire region and the world needs to be united with that. Iran has been creating these proxies around Israel for decades now in order to protect itself, to destroy Israel, and to protect the nuclear plant that they're building. We have to stop them. And I believe that both administrations understand this, but I think the Middle East is paying attention to what's happening right now. I think they do.
No, I botched your book the first time around. Apologies. It is a simple guide to the most misunderstood country on earth. She is Noah Tishby. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, Noah.
Having me.
You got it. All right, still to come here on the Hill. The popular radio personality Charlemagne the God says Democrats are out of touch. Why he's singing a different tune after the election. Did you see what he said today about the way the campaign was run? That's on the other side of the break when the Hill returns.
NewsNation is the first network to project with our partners Decision Desk HQ that Donald Trump will be the 47th president.
No one has been close to NewsNation. This is the biggest call of the night.
NewsNation is news for all America.
All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. President-elect Donald Trump won the popular vote, at least as it stands now, by give or take some 4 million over Vice President Kamala Harris. And that's leading the Daily Show host Jon Stewart to weigh in on what he says is the legitimacy of Trump's historic win compared to the first go-around in 2016. Here he was on his latest podcast episode of The Weekly Show.
This feels different because it is a Democratic victory. It was a win. You know, I feel like we were prepared for all scenarios. And each one of those scenarios, it was, how is Donald Trump going to finagle his way back into the way? How is he going to use undemocratic principles? And it turned out he used our electoral system as it is designed. And in that moment, I thought, well, I'm not sure we have a team of lawyers for that.
Full panel with me now. Ashley Hayek is the executive director of America First Works. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Julia Manchester, national political reporter for TheHill.com. There we go. Brad Howard is a Democratic strategist. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. It's at Chris Stirewalt, ... Did I know you there?
Fill in the blank.
Fill in the blank with Stirewalt. It's a Friday after the election. You do you, right?
Neat enthusiast, simple country pundit.
Is it just, so he used the electoral system. Is it that, or he just won the popular vote? And he was the better,
both. That's what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
Like, get over it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Democrats, what we're struggling with right now for a lot of folks in our party is, our view of America is vastly different than reality. And I think we saw that in the election. A lot of Democrats can't fundamentally understand how anyone could even remotely, they think he's so dangerous and they're frustrated that, the electorate can't see it. And my argument has been, well, we made a bad case. And maybe not calling someone dangerous, maybe focusing on policy and telling your story and attacking Republicans on those policies would have been a better effect. Because what you're seeing in a lot of these House races, these House Democrats, especially the Blue Dogs, hung on. When you look at,
the Blue Dogs, the moderates.
Correct. And when you look at, say, Oregon 5, this is a great case study of what's wrong with the party. Kurt Schrader went down in a primary in 2022. A progressive challenger beat him. This is a D+2 district, means it's slight Democratic advantage. And the progressive lost the general to a Republican. This cycle, the Democrats nominated a moderate, and that moderate defeated the Republican incumbent in a red wave year. So that just shows when we allow people to represent their districts and don't demand party cohesion, we can win.
You were a part of the operation.
Ground game.
Yes, the ground game. When did you get a sense that this was coming? I know you wanted it to come, right, obviously, but when did you get the sense that this is what it was going to be?
Going into the weekend before the election, the math was there already. So, for example, on Thursday, Friday night before the election, a lot of pundits started talking about how Kamala Harris had all this support with women. So we started looking at the data specifically. Are women turning out early and through absentee voting for Kamala Harris? And in the 7 battleground states, they were down by over 546,000 votes in the battleground states amongst women. So that tells me that while a lot of the establishment media, pundits, the political elite have been talking about, joy, vibes, transgenderism, all of these very, left-leaning policies, we had been delivering America First policies, keeping tampons out of little boys' bathrooms, for example, or bringing prosperity to the American people, focusing on policies, to your point, was working. And we, just in the math, that's when we knew it was Friday night going into the election.
I was going to say, I disagree slightly in the sense that I think, look, Trump's message was very simple. Things are broken, and I'm going to fix them. And I think all the other kind of issues you mentioned all through that one premise. And Democrats just couldn't acknowledge that it was broken. And when we talked about defending democracy, I think voters heard defending the broken system. And it just backfired on them.
What are you hearing, Julia?
Look, obviously this was an overwhelming win for Republicans. The fact that we're talking about Donald Trump, the first Republican since 2004 winning the popular vote, that makes it easier for him to say, look, I have a mandate. He's going to have a very smooth confirmation process in the Senate. And look, I think it's going to be easier, obviously, for him to implement his agenda. I think Democrats, though, are looking at themselves in the mirror, trying to figure out how to move forward and how to get away from this, I guess, stereotype or this perception that they are the party of the elites.
Voters aren't that ideological. People who are ideological are already going to vote for one party or the other. They're mostly results-oriented. They were not happy with the results of the Biden administration, so they voted the Biden administration out. Similarly, they had not been happy with the results of the Trump administration, so they voted the Trump administration out. And if the new Trump administration doesn't do a good job, they'll vote them out too. This is the first time since the 1880s that we have had an incumbent party lose 3 consecutive elections.
Wow.
The message from the voters is clear. They agree with Donald Trump that it's broken, but they're not yet going to be convinced. So Republicans have to proceed into this space very carefully and not make the same mistake that Democrats made and overinterpret a mandate and do things that people don't want.
All right, meantime, the Breakfast Club's Charlemagne the God is reacting to Donald Trump's victory, calling out the Democrats for how they went about things.
Don't y'all find it strange that now that he's won, they're not calling him a threat to democracy? They're not calling him a fascist?
Now, just a month ago on that very same show, Charlemagne the God interviewed Vice President Harris, who agreed with him that Trump's vision is fascism.
You have 2 choices if you do. And it's 2 very different visions for our nation.
The other is about fascism. Why can't we just say it?
Yes, we can say that.
Yeah. So I hear, why did we go down that road? And the reality is, a lot of folks went down that road.
Now, wait. What would we be saying today if Kamala Harris was still calling Donald Trump a fascist?
Today, if she lost or won?
If she lost,
okay,
and she was still calling him a fascist, what would we rightly say? Sore loser, bad for the country, how dare you do that? You lost the election. Now it's his turn. He gets a chance to do it. So that's a bunch of hogwash. You can't say, oh, she was lying then because she's not saying it now. That's just not being a sore loser.
Well, and also, remember, the week before the election, Charlemagne the God got into it with Anderson Cooper, saying, why aren't you calling him fascist more? So it's really hypocritical to then turn around and say, well, you didn't have vision, or it's someone else's fault.
So your point on him is?
I want to commend everyone.
For coming.
Way to go, America. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, thus far,
just moving
are
on.
conducting themselves like grown-ups, and that's good. And it would not be good if Kamala Harris was going around saying, see, I told you, he's a fascist.
Right, got it. Okay.
Yeah, everything that Chris said, we are seeing Democrats do what they are supposed to do, what the losing party does. It's a good example to set for the rest of the country. And quite frankly, it's really a contrast with what we saw 4 years ago.
You've got a Sunday show coming up.
So good.
It's going to be so good. Senator Mike Rounds, Congressman John Garamendi, what are we getting from you this week?
There's a lot cooking in the Senate next week. Next week is a hugely important week for the Senate. And Mike Rounds draws a lot of water in the United States Senate. And we're going to have the very same kind of conversations with Garamendi that we just had here about where the Democrats go from here.
All right. That's 10 a.m. Eastern. He is Chris Steyerwalt.
So good.
And it's The Hill Sunday. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here on a Friday night. Other side of the break. Who will Donald Trump pick as he heads into his second term at the White House? Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins me live. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation as President-elect Trump enters his second term in the White House. He's already ahead of schedule, you could say, when it comes to appointing members of his team compared to where he was in 2016. It only took 2 days for Trump to announce his White House chief of staff this go around. In 2016, he waited until the weekend, 5 days, to announce Reince Priebus in the same position. So possibly we could see some movement over the weekend. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. This is going to be a much different transition. I remember being there at Trump Tower, and it was like, who's coming down the elevator? Who just went
casting
up?
call,
it was
right,
a casting
for the Trump
call,
show.
and a lot different this time. Mar-a-Lago, security concerns, media much further away.
Yeah, I think also the biggest difference is they're ready for it this time.
Yeah, experience.
Trump the last time, they didn't think they were going to win. They didn't plan for it. In fact, the campaign had ended all the corporate housing for the staff on Wednesday morning. Right. Everybody spent Wednesday trying to figure out where they were going to stay. They thought they were going home with their bags packed. So, this is now a professional political operation. And the fact that Susie Wiles is at the top, I think, sort of gives you a direction of where this is headed.
You have Henry Cuellar tonight on
Democrat,
the show, which is